Today I'm going to discuss the structure of tooth. Basically, three things are most important in the structure of tooth, that is a crown, neck and root. If we talk about crown, what is crown? That is the part that is visible to us, that is known as a crown. That is a shiny bright part. We talk as it is a shiny bright part that is known as a crown. That is the upper and the visible part, as you can see in the diagram, that this is a crown and it is the visible and the shiny part, that is the shiny bright part. And if we talk about the neck, if we talk about the neck is basically that is attached, the part that is attached with the gums. These are the gums. If that is the gums, and the part that is attached with the gums, that is known as neck. Here I'm writing the part that is which is attached with the gums, that is known as neck. And if we talk about the root is basically the part that is attached with the underbone, that is the downward bone that is not visible to us, that is known as root part. That is a bone which is that is attached with the underbone, that is known as a root part. The crown part is visible to us, the neck part and the root part, they both are not visible to us. Neck is also not visible to us, and that is attached with the gums in the downward side. And root is also not visible to us, that is attached, or we can say the part that is attached with the underbone, that is known as root. Now these three parts are done. Now the upper part of the crown, that is known as enamel. Enamel is basically the hardest substance, the hardest part of the crown, that is also visible to us, that is the hardest substance. And it is basically originated from the ectoderm. That is originated means the origin of the enamel is from the ectoderm, and it is originated from ectoderm, and it is the hardest substance, and it is basically made up of two things, that is calcium phosphate, and second thing is fluoride. It is made up of, or we can say it is composed of two things, that is calcium phosphate and fluoride. Calcium phosphate is also known as hydroxyapatite. And another, if there will be the, if it gets in excess amount, the fluoride gets in the excess amount, it will lead to the dental fluorosis. Dental fluorosis, we can say that it is basically a disease. In this there will be the discoloration of the tooth. So basically for dental fluorosis cause the discoloration of tooth, as well as the enamel part. There will be the decaying of enamel part in the small pieces, or we can say that the roughness type occurs on that surface. The roughness occurs due to the excess amount of fluoride. If the fluoride gets in the excess amount, it leads to the dental fluorosis. That is a disease. It's a type of disease that causes discoloration of tooth, or we can say decaying of the enamel in the small pieces, or the roughness occurs in that. Enamel is basically composed or made up of the cell, or the covered of the cell that is known as ameloblast cell. The enamel part that is composed or made up of the cells that are known as ameloblast cells. Now there is a membrane, a layer that is known as the outer layer of the dentine, that is known as a periodontal membrane, that is the outer layer of dentine. This is dentine, and the outer layer of the dentine is known as periodontal membrane. Periodontal membrane is also a supportive membrane that provides a support to the dentine, and between the periodontal membrane and the outer bone, this is the outer bone, and between that there is a layer that is known as a cementing layer, and that is known as a cementing layer. Cementing layer is basically a layer between a periodontal membrane and the outer bone that basically joins the dentine bone with the cavity bone. That is the work of cementing. Cementing word is basically expressing that joins the two things, that is the cavity bone as well as the dentine bone. Here I'm writing that it joins the dentine bone and a cavity bone. Now this part is basically known as dentine. What is dentine? Dentine is basically the part of the tooth, the inner part of the tooth. It is made up of the cells that are known as odontoblast cells. In enamel there are the cells that was ameloblast cells, and in this dentine cells, the dentine is made up of the cells that are called odontoblast cells. Means it is secreted by odontoblast cells, and it is made up of the thing that is calcium salt. It is made up of a calcium salt, and dentine is originated from the mesoderm. This is the part of dentine, and it is originated from the mesoderm, as the enamel was originated from the ectoderm, so it is originated from the mesoderm. And the opening of, or we can say the basal part of the dentine, or this is the alveolar cavity, alveolar bone or alveolar cavity. The basal part of the alveolar cavity or the alveolar bone or the dentine, that is known as apical foramen. What is apical foramen? That is basically a basal part, the basal part of the alveolar cavity or the dentine, that is known as the apical foramen. If we talk about the alveolar cavity, there are two jaws. The upper jaw, that is known as a maxillary part or the maxillary cavity, and if we talk about the lower jaw, that is known as mandible part or the mandible cavity. These are two jaws. Generally we call them as a alveolar cavity. As I have drawn this structure can be of the lower jaw or the upper jaw, so I have just written generally that it is a alveolar cavity. If we talk about the general, that is alveolar cavity, and if we talk about the specific, the upper jaw is having a maxillary cavity, that is known as, and lower jaw is known as a mandible cavity. Now this part, that is the last part, that is this part is known as a pulp cavity. Pulp cavity is basically composed or filled with the tissues that are known as connective tissues, that are composed of the connective tissues, and pulp cavity is a living part in the tooth, and it is composed or filled with the connective tissues. In this, two things are included. First is nerves, second is blood vessels. As they are visible here, these blue one is a blood vessel, that are the nerves that is present in the pulp cavity. So nerves, what is nerves? The sensation, like they detect the sensitivity and the impulse that are generated here in the tooth. The sensory nerves and the motor nerves are responsible. So the nerves basically generate the impulse that are generated, they take them to the brain and come back. So that is the work of the nerve. They detect the sensitivity, and blood vessels basically supply the oxygenated blood to the tooth, and they supply the nutrients as well. The blood vessel basically supply the nutrients, like as the calcium phosphate, the calcium salt, and the fluoride, they all are supplied by the blood vessels. So that was all about the single tooth, that there are many parts in that. That is a periodontal membrane, cementing layer. These are three: crown, neck, root, pulp cavity, enamel, and dentine. That is a major part, and this part is not visible to us. Only the part that is visible to us is the crown and the enamel.